Well, that's quite a bold claim to suggest that I found Atlantis, especially as I'm here in Wiltshire in southern Britain in a ditch. But this isn't any ditch. This ditch is going to help me explain to you exactly how I found Atlantis. I've always had a fascination with maps, maybe the more local scale, because my life from an early age was about exploring the features that I found on those maps. But have a look at this one, because this one is a problem. It looks professional, it looks really well done, it looks like a mapping organisation or a government body has done this. And it doesn't stop there, because there's countless ones of these and they're all beautifully drawn, they all look amazing works of art, but they all contain one thing in common: they're all depicting a world that doesn't actually exist. That got me thinking about this earthwork here, this linear structure. This stretches across a large part of southern Britain, and despite countless pieces of evidence telling us that this was a defensive structure protecting what was on the south side, from here on the north we have the bank on that side and a ditch here, the very small counterscarp underneath me. But despite all of that, there's still a small fraction of people that think that this was actually... Let me come to that shortly. This is the story of how I found Atlantis in southern Britain. Okay, before we get into this rather crazy story of Atlantis, we're going to have a quick word from this week's sponsors, somebody that I've been sponsored from before. This is the book. It contains hundreds of topics on how to sort of restart a civilization, from the real basics in terms of edibility, what you can eat. Then you move forward into industrial stuff, and it tells you every little detail about every topic you can imagine. Measuring tools, oil refinery, the wheel, the potter's wheel, forging. An absolute joy in here. This is a perfect gift. But it doesn't stop there, because they're offering something else. Have a look at this. The puzzle to go with the book. And this is kind of a steampunk design puzzle. 1,000 pieces. Absolute perfect gift for you, your kids, your grandparents, to give to your kids. Any combination or permutation. These things are genius. Do not open until you've assembled the puzzle. Little treat for you there. Okay, so we're off home to go and build the puzzle. If you guys are interested in this, today's sponsor, the book and or the puzzle, you can get it as a bundle or you can get them separate. We've got a discount code. You can get 10% on either or both as a bundle. Beautifully illustrated encyclopedia of human invention, and it's an absolute joy, I assure you. I'm sat for hours reading this. Perfect gift. Go click on the link below and let's go on with the rest of the video. So what is Atlantis? What do we know of this tale? Now, Plato described a land that had sunk into the sea following a catastrophic disaster. A land that was filled with technologies, a magnificent irrigation system, canals, a naval army, society that was organised beyond what we can imagine today. Plato was a descendant of Solon, and this description appears to have come from an account when Solon met a priest 100 years or so before. Ask any historian and most agree that he was talking figuratively, describing an idyllic world, but there are others, of course, that don't. So 800 years or so later, we start exploring and we start heading across the Atlantic in search of lands and resources, and maybe, just maybe, at the back of our minds, lost technologies. And of course we find a lot of lost cities. We find South America and we find all sorts of wonderful treasures. So maybe, just maybe, Plato was right after all. So Atlantis is now firmly back on the map, and here in Britain we have antiquarians doing all sorts of antiquarian things. And of course we still believe the earth is very young, because one of our only sources of information to those antiquarians is one of these. Okay, so science moves forward and we start to explain a lot of things. We start to understand physics and the nature of the earth and perhaps planets and such. If we found Atlantis, well, maybe, just maybe, we could start to explain science even more. So in steps this guy. Well, this guy, William Scott Elliot. He's part of some kind of philosophical society, a lodge. Not a whiff of science about it, but nevertheless a lot of theorising. And he loves maps. And he draws maps, and this is key to our story today, because he comes up with this. It looks professional. It looks like it's done by a government body or mapping agency. We have Atlantis drawn on there like it's a science. I hurt my leg last week, so I'm struggling with the nature of this slope in these woods, but nevertheless, back to our bank and ditch system. here in the West Woods, the Wansdyke. It's all good for me because I can stand here in the landscape and I can sort of try and work out stuff looking at everything that's around me. That's not the be all and end all, of course. It doesn't qualify me over any academic as such. It just gives me a nice view and a good idea of where things were in the lay of the land. However, for maybe 300 years or so now, antiquarians have been trying to work out what this was for, why it was built, why we have a huge wall one side and a ditch here in front of it. And we start in the 1700s with a man called William Stukeley, and he said, well, a lot of this looks like a classic Iron Age hill fort type construction. Obviously not round, but a long linear structure, but still the same shape and design as that. So he declared it was Iron Age, and it was, of course, the Balgai tribe that built it. Next up, Augustus Pitt Rivers comes along and he really introduces some proper science in the form of archaeology, and he digs and he narrows the date down using some simple archaeological methods, post-Roman he declares, and of course the latest date 900 CE because it's mentioned in a few Anglo-Saxon charters. Now today, only in the last few years, have we actually pinned down a date for this. We have 650 CE to 750 CE, 100-year range of course, but it helps us establish what this is in its historical sense. And we used a piece of soil taken from within the bank, and we said that last saw light within those date ranges. We use science. So the question is now, you're probably thinking, how does that relate to Atlantis? Now, if we thought that Plato's description was mad, well, this book is a level or two up and some. It's essentially complete nonsense, but it's describing a world, this Atlantis world, in great detail from 1 million years ago when it was in its prime. It's really presenting this as fact. It's presenting this using things that did happen. Look at even the title of the book, A Geographical History and Ethnological Sketch, illustrated by 4 maps of the world's configuration at different periods. We have underwater reservoirs, a really complicated canal system that gave irrigation to the land and provided this civilization with water, a unique Atlantean people. So imagine my surprise when I stumbled across this YouTube channel which suggested a number of things, not least Wansdyke and Offansdyke were actually prehistoric canals. I'm sorry, a what now? Don't get me wrong, I'm all for new ideas, new hypotheses, new theories. So I joined the Facebook group. Looks on the face of it quite well presented. I clicked join. Wansdyke and Offansdyke were actually prehistoric canals. So back here you might be thinking exactly what I did. What? The video goes on to suggest that this water level at the time, the river levels and I presume the water table, was actually much higher in the Mesolithic period, maybe 180 metres or more. Well, I don't think it was. Also, it doesn't explain the 85 metre above sea level section of the Wansdyke, which is maybe 10-15 miles. It doesn't explain the huge hill that's behind me that I'm stood in right now. It doesn't explain or tackle a lot of things. Now, it also suggests that, well, this couldn't be a defensive wall because there have been no bodies found to date in, on or near the wall. Well, that's great. That means it's worked perhaps when they built it, but there's a lot of archaeology to suggest that this wasn't a long-lived structure. It was built and then out of use straight away. But the point is, a lack of evidence of something doesn't mean that the original theory is wrong. It just means you need to do more science, more archaeology to try and understand it better, add to what we already have and what we can already scientifically prove. Okay, so I promised myself I wouldn't do a debunk on the whole Offansdyke, Wansdyke being canals. However, all of this is really problematic, and here's why. Late summer 2023, and there is a talk by Dr. Alex Langlands in the Wiltshire Museum in Devizes, and I went along, really compelling talk, loads of really juicy bits about Wansdyke, and of course that's when he revealed to us the date from the study as an approximation. Fantastic. There was naturally a Q&A at the end of that, and somebody innocently asked a question.
I've heard there was evidence from an academic that this was a prehistoric canal.
Okay, so Dr. Alex Langlands politely answered and said no it wasn't, and then moved on. Okay, so let's take stock of all of this. We have Atlantis right now on steroids because we have Graham Hancock with his latest Netflix series, more than one of course, going on about those sort of things, a forgotten ancient technology that we can't possibly have known about. And here's why, and it's probably a big cover-up from all archaeologists and academics, flying in the face of gaps in archaeology and understanding and just filling it with complete nonsense. A lack of funding or work in a specific area of archaeology just means that there's a lack of funding and specific work in an area of archaeology, but no, apparently what this means is there's a massive cover-up and we're hiding something. And then there is the smaller scale. Here we have the hill forts, the defensive walls, Wansdyke, Offansdyke, all being prehistoric canals and waterways. This on this bank and ditch here in Wiltshire, the bank and ditch that crosses part of southern England, and the wacky theories that come with it. Well, it's the same as the Graham Hancock and the Atlantis. It's all dressed up in science and academia when those theories really are anything but. And of course there are then papers on those websites that suggest that peer-reviewed papers are completely pointless. Peer-reviewed papers are just that. They're your work reviewed by other scientists, other academics with life's works of training in their own study. They can add so much value to what you've done, and you then add value to what they've done. It's a wonderful world of how science works. But I guess if you don't want your work scientifically reviewed or peer-reviewed, well, I guess that speaks volumes. But above all, there is one more huge question. You see, my belief is the likes of William Scott Elliot, well, they were filling in blanks of what they would believe to be true, albeit with no scientific evidence whatsoever. They just filled in this story, and here we are now back in Wiltshire, and I feel like we're doing the same here. If you look at both ends of this section of Wansdyke, well, both ends that we can see today using the LiDAR, well, they start at 185 metres, so that would be very easy to raise the sea levels and fill in the blanks. A story that fits the narrative, and we build on that. And here is the key. From that point forward, every other question that's raised, every point that's raised around Atlantis, whether it's the Atlantis or whether it's this Atlantis here in Wiltshire, well, it doesn't change their story. Their story can't change because it's a life work based on one thing, one notion. The thing is, it's okay to have mystery. It's okay to have stuff that you don't understand. It doesn't mean there's a cover-up. It doesn't mean there's some kind of conspiracy going on. It just means that perhaps there hasn't been work done there for probable lack of funding reasons. Take this, for example, the Wansdyke that I've hammered on about today quite a lot. We have a date, 650 to 750 CE. With that in mind, well, that's quite a broad date. If we could pin that down, if we had more funding to take more samples, if we could take maybe 10 more samples, well, then all of a sudden we'd have a really good understanding of that exact era of history. We could tell why these people built this 30-40 mile long defensive wall protecting the south from the north. Imagine if we actually understood that. But even now, we want to fly in the face of research, science, academia and archaeology. We want to fill in some gaps with something suggesting that those people that do spend their life's work in universities with scientific equipment and analysis are somehow covering it up, and this one person is correct. But the key for me is this is the most important thing. All of this, whatever the scale, whether we're talking just localized bits and pieces or whether we're talking Atlantis, this is always dressed up as science. It's dressed up to be fact, and that really is the most crucial part. It's dangerous. It appears to be real. Hope you've enjoyed this little production, something a bit different this week. If you like these sort of videos, you can join our behind the scenes, which Rebecca's just filming now. We've been out filming all day, and you can kind of see this, us filming this behind the filming. You're filming behind the scenes.
I am. I'm behind the scenes.
Goodness me, we nearly forgot. Big thanks to this week's sponsor, the book, and of course the puzzle, which we've been doing over the weekend. One top tip from us.
Don't necessarily start with the edges.
Click the link just here. We'll see you this time next week.